Mr. Chairman, I might have a little bit of background about that. There was a really big organized push with the Continental Divide Trail. There was actually a nonprofit that put together all the trail alignments and the marketing and that kind of thing. And I believe that in the last year or so, that nonprofit is no longer in existence. So I think that the management and the forward motion with the Continental Divide Trail has, very similar to the Rio Grande Trail, hit a roadblock. And so I think that it's very important as well, and I think that it is something that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about what we're doing here. But at this point, I don't know that there's any leadership. Did you happen to hear when you were there if there was anything further going on with that?
As far as finance or leadership, no. It's my understanding from the group that we met with that the trail is well established, signage is in place, and that now it's happening organically. People are coming from all over the world to hike the Continental Divide Trail, and I don't have an estimate outside of tens of thousands of people coming through New Mexico to hike that trail. So I think, when we look at what we have now, the assets that we have now and the trail inventory that we have now, the difference in, from a promotional standpoint, how we package and promote it, and is the goal to eventually have a through trail that really is all 500 miles along the Rio Grande, that people can come and do, a completely different experience or have a different experience. However, I appreciate the fact that we have something to start with from a promotional standpoint, similar to the Manhattan the Project National Park, which is in 3 different geographical locations, but one state park. I'm sorry, one national park. So, I think that there's a lot that we can do with this, but again, just curious how, as we talk structure, how we can, look at what's already been done.
Can I chime? I've actually hiked the Continental Divide Trail twice, so I can give you some clarity on that. The Continental Divide Trail, it's a national scenic trail, so that is ultimately probably under the Department of the Interior. It was designated as a national scenic trail in, I think, 1978. It would be different than the Rio Grande Trail in that it is a national scenic trail, so it's federal level. And in terms of the promoting and marketing of it, they basically face the same challenges that we're going to face. That trail's 3,100 miles long, and you have to knit together all the various property owners, tribal lands, BLM lands, state land. So their structure is essentially to have a kind of citizen advocacy group. There's a new one, Ms. Tafoya, which is the Continental Divide Trail Coalition, replacing the Alliance. So they're in place. They're in Boulder, Denver, I believe. But then they also have someone on the federal level someone's watching out for them. And the marketing of it is going to be a long-term thing, just as the establishment of this trail is going to be a long-term thing, because the complexity of knitting together all of those various, just who's on the land, is just, it's overwhelming. So in 1978, I think, maybe for 20 years, I'm rambling, but 20 years, 1978 to maybe like 2000, a handful of people hiked that trail. It is still not finished. A majority of unfinished miles are in New Mexico. You do Jeep track, overland, whatever. But it's an ongoing thing. Knitting it together and promoting it will be an ongoing thing as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members, Terry Heslin, Bureau of Land Management. Just to add on to Commissioner Maddox's comments, the Continental Divide Trail was one of the original components of the National Trails Act. It evolved to include historic trails, among which, and I see we'll talk stakeholders later, but the El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, the Kings Highway that also parallels the trail we're talking about. This is an involved process. Congress requires a feasibility study then Congress has the prerogative to include additional trails in the National Trails Act. Probably the closest parallel to this particular trail would be the Arizona Trail was a very recent component of the National Trails Act in the 2009 Omnibus Bill, the Public Lands Omnibus Bill. But it was a culmination of many, many years, as Mr. Maddox explains, the Arizona Trail, Continental Divide Trail. They're big concepts that really connect the dots type of arrangements, much like the governor's doing here. But it is a parallel process, and it may happen if the vision behind this trail, in my mind, it sounds like it would be more of a scenic trail than a historic trail. But I don't want to ramble either. But hopefully, one of the stakeholders involved in this effort would be the Carta organization and the El Camino Real. It's an international, the El Camino in New Mexico is part of the National Trail component because it's in the United States. On down to Chihuahua, it is, I'm not sure what kind of status, but it's our one international national trail.
Thank you. Representative Steinberg.
Chairman, I appreciate those comments. So I have been in touch with Carpenter Trail Association. In fact, hopefully they couldn't make it today. Hopefully maybe some of them are watching via webcast. The legislation does speak to working in conjunction with the El Camino Trail project when it makes sense. And gentleman spoke to it, Mr. Chairman. But I think an end game to think about with this New Mexico Trail is getting a National Scenic Trails designation. Much like the Appalachian Trail, much like the Arizona Trail, this, I believe, they do get funding, I think, from Congress, from the Department of Interior for some of these trails. So it's a potential funding source to help us manage a long-distance trail and elevate it in terms of promotion to a whole other level. That would be something we would, I think about to help with our congressional delegation. So, and the Florida Trail as well, they're also part of the National Scenic Trail. So, talk about that.
Speaking of funding, we have had some indication from some nonprofit groups that there could be some funding available through some of those people. So I think if we can show that we really are starting to make some progress, I think there are opportunities out there to attract some funding from some of those sources as well. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I know Commissioner Tafoya mentioned that there had been there was a charter, there's a vision, there's a mission, there's a whole lot of work that has already preceded our meeting today. I would hope that we have some time to review that information and look at what all the different individuals and organizations so forth have contributed, so that I personally need to be better prepared to offer ideas, and so I would hope by the next meeting we have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would think that one of the first efforts would be some sort of a strategic management plan that's kind of all-encompassing with regard to where we hope to go and how we hope to get there, with regard to budgets and communication to the different entities that are going to participate, from the federal government to the local governments, and start to develop all that in one strategic document that somebody would prepare. And I could nominate somebody here real quick, but I think that's probably your choice to figure that out. But that would give a good guidance to us as we attempt to accomplish each of these tasks. And for what it's worth, that might be a good starting point.
Thank you. Other comments? We've talked a little bit about the various landowners, and I guess for the next meeting we'll bring information, and we could probably send some of that out prior to the next meeting so that the commission is better informed, and also provide information on the charter. we also want to make sure that we've had some discussion on stakeholders, but identifying all the stakeholders that would have some interest in that, and making sure that we involve them and get their thoughts and comments and suggestions. Any other discussion on any of those items? 8.
If I may, we at some point, obviously, we're going to recognize, in particularly the privately owned areas that would be involved, and those folks need to know what is going on, and certainly they may want to participate clearly to some extent. And then you've got, of course, the tribal governments that also should be formally advised of the intent of this commission and its purpose. So I think that is essential going forth, that we give notice, if you will, of our intent and their desire or request that they participate and become part of and take ownership of those privately owned or government owned areas that we're going to traverse in the process.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes.
And following up on Mr. Cisneros' comment, for what it's worth, if anything, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy busts their organization into 13 separate chapters. So, I mean, if you're talking 500-mile trail, having chapters in which that is organized or subgroups is going to be key, so that if you're a local landowner, you're not going in town, you're not going to somebody in Las Cruces to talk to, somebody in your backyard, your neighbor.
Indeed.
Can I ask about the Appalachian Trail? I mean, do they have, information and taking people that are on the trail to nearby historic sites, or, I mean, I would anticipate that, we would have, some connection or marketing or trying to move people from the trail to all the other things that we've got in the nearby vicinity, like the Bosque Wildlife Refuge, White Sands, Monument, and those kinds of cultural sites that are pretty close connected. I mean, does the Appalachian Trail incorporate? Do they go off the trail and then come back and connect, or do you just have a trail that's really specific to the Rio Grande, and then if people want to veer off into fishing expeditions or hunting or hiking or whatever other kinds of sundry things that people that have too much time on their hands to get them to do other things. I mean, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, you can go as far with that as you want to. The way the Appalachian Trail is structured is it's 2,200 miles of white blazes, and that's what designates the Appalachian Trail. For side trails, it's a system of blue blazes. So you could go to that scenic overlook, that historic site, whatever. And then for ones that are farther afield that you're not necessarily going to walk to, they're yellow blazes, which is the road. So the nature of a 500-mile line is that you're going to cross basically everything that there is to cross running east-west if you're going north-south. So the connectivity is as much or as little as you want.
That's what.
Yes.
Hey.
Are there private?
Mr. Chair and Senator Ryan, to add on to that, at how in Silver City, how they are taking, I don't want to say taking advantage of, but how taking advantage of the hikers that are coming into Silver City. As part of the Continental Divide Trail, they're really making an effort for the community support system that surrounds those through hikers, and they've designated that their visitor center, which is like in downtown, so nowhere near the actual trail, is a place where through hikers can come in. They have a box of the members of the community put in water, food, jackets, anything that someone who's hiking the trail may need, and then someone can stop in. You take something, you give something back. If you need a fresh pair of clothes so that you can go into the community and have dinner for the evening, it's there for you. And then when you're done, you bring it back. And I think there are a lot of, from a tourism perspective, a lot of support systems that can exist surrounding the creation of this trail. And I think it's up to from my perspective, the tourism industry to take advantage of those the people that are walking through or hiking through, you know, and to have, you know, the Albuquerque CVB can have something that's easily getting folks from the Rio Grande Nature Center down to Nob Hill or Old Town. They can provide some transportation of that, you know, something designated. And then I also think there are your, you know, two different types of hikers. There are the through hikers that want to do the 2,200 miles of the Continental Divide Trail, and then there's a family of four that wants to hike a mile and say, we did the Continental Divide Trail. So there, you know, there are people that will come and that this will be an item that they can cross off of a list while they're here on vacation as part of a larger picture. So I think to summarize that, there's a lot that we at the tourism department level can do to engage stakeholders that will put infrastructure in place to really put together a more robust offering for folks here on the trail.
Senator Ryan, it's a good question, and I've hiked a little bit of the Appalachian Trail, not like Pete. How many times have you done the Appalachian Trail? All 2,200 miles of it. So pretty amazing. You know, the Appalachian and the Continental Divide Trails are pretty remote trails. Like they're you know, Appalachian Trail is climbing a lot of mountain tops and very rural settings. What's cool about this trail that's unique, and what is unique for New Mexico, is it goes down the central New Mexico corridor at points along the way very close to all kinds of communities, Las Cruces, TRC, Socoto, Bosque Hill, Apache, and then you know, Taos, and of course, going right through Albuquerque, and it travels through, I think, 6 state parks, 3 national monuments, 2 national wildlife refuges. So the opportunity, and then, you know, all this Native American history and culture. And I think I would hope that we would maximize all tourism points to get on, get off, education, not only natural resources, but cultural history, not in a amusement park kind of a way. I mean, you know, how you manage that on a trail. But as far as how you promote that, like the Secretary Latham said, you know, these segment hikers, what they call them, who will come and do maybe just from the Las Cruces to TRC or just even a mile or two.